The massive space station orbited silently in the darkness between stars, its metal hull gleaming under distant starlight. Inside the Galactic Council's deep space monitoring facility, hundreds of alien beings worked at their posts, scanning the galaxy for signs of new civilizations. Most days brought nothing but cosmic static and the occasional meteor shower. Communications. Officer Zelneth adjusted his 6 eyes as he stared at the incoming data stream. His blue-scaled fingers moved across the control panel with practiced ease. For the past 3 hours, he had been monitoring the Outer Rim sectors where few intelligent species had ever been found. The work was boring, but someone had to do it. Suddenly his console lit up with flashing alerts. Transmission was coming through from a previously unexplored region of space. Zelneth's heart rate quickened as he began analyzing the signal. It was clearly artificial, not some natural phenomenon. The mathematical patterns were too organized, too deliberate. The signal repeated every few minutes, broadcasting basic mathematical sequences that any spacefaring civilization would recognize. Prime numbers, geometric progressions, and simple equations that screamed intelligence. But there was something else embedded in the transmission, what appeared to be a desperate plea for help. The message came from a small blue planet in a yellow star system. The inhabitants called themselves humans, and their world Earth. From what Zelneth could decipher, they were facing multiple crises. Their planet was warming dangerously, their oceans were rising, and their species seemed to be destroying itself through constant warfare. Zelneth immediately forwarded the transmission to Dr. Kethfer, the Council's most experienced xenobiologist. The elderly scientist had studied over 300 different alien species during his long career. If anyone could make sense of this strange signal, it would be him. Dr. Kethfer barely looked up from his research when the transmission arrived. His gray tentacles moved lazily as he reviewed the data. He had seen this pattern countless times before, a dying civilization sending out desperate messages into the void, hoping someone would hear them before it was too late. Another primitive species facing extinction, he muttered to his assistant, filing the report under standard protocol. They always wait too long to ask for help. By the time we receive their signals, they're usually already gone. But the Galactic Council had strict regulations about responding to distress calls, no matter how hopeless they seemed. Even if a species was beyond saving, they were required to investigate and document what had happened. It was part of their duty to preserve the memory of lost civilizations. The survey ship Harmony's Edge received its orders within hours. Captain Veltar and his crew were experienced in these sad missions. They would travel to this Earth expecting to find empty cities and silent oceans. Perhaps they would discover some survivors hiding in underground bunkers. Maybe they would arrive to find nothing but ruins and regret. As the ship prepared for its journey to the distant blue planet, none of the crew imagined they were about to encounter something that would change the entire galaxy forever. The Harmony's Edge shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its engines cooling from the long journey across the galaxy. Captain Veltar stretched his forearms and prepared himself for another depressing mission. His crew had done this dozens of times before: arrive at a dead world, document what remained, and file another report about a species that couldn't save itself. But as the ship's sensors came online, Veltar's purple eyes widened in complete shock. The tactical display wasn't showing the empty void of space he expected. Instead, his screens lit up with hundreds of artificial objects scattered throughout the star system. Navigation Officer Kess, run a full system scan immediately, Veltar ordered, his voice tense with confusion. The young Zephyrian's tentacles moved quickly across her console, gathering data that made no sense. Captain, I'm detecting massive orbital stations around the third planet, Kess reported, her voice filled with disbelief. There are also permanent structures on the natural satellite, their moon. And sir, there are ships everywhere. Veltar studied the readings more carefully. This wasn't the ruins of a dead civilization. These were active installations, clearly maintained and fully operational. Energy signatures indicated thriving colonies, bustling with activity. Mining operations, manufacturing facilities, and what appeared to be military installations dotted the entire system. This isn't a dying species, Veltar realized, his mind racing to understand what they had stumbled into. These humans are not only alive, they're expanding throughout their star system. The crew exchanged nervous glances. They had come prepared for a rescue mission, not a first contact situation. With an unknown military power, their survey ship was lightly armed and carried scientific equipment, not weapons designed for potential conflict. Following standard Galactic Council protocols, Veltar ordered his communications officer to broadcast a peaceful greeting. The message was transmitted on multiple frequencies, using mathematical patterns that any intelligent species would recognize as non-threatening. The human response was swift and overwhelming. Within minutes, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Dozens of vessels were moving toward their position at incredible speeds, their approach patterns clearly military in nature. "Captain, I count 43 ships converging on our location," reported Lieutenant Zex, his voice cracking with fear. "They're surrounding us in a defensive formation." Veltar watched in amazement as sleek human vessels took strategic positions around his ship. These weren't the crude spacecraft he expected from a species that had supposedly sent out distress calls. These ships moved with precision and purpose, their whole design suggesting advanced technology and extensive combat experience. The largest human vessel positioned itself directly in front of the Harmony's edge, its weapon systems clearly visible, but not yet powered up. It was a message that needed no translation. The humans were ready for either diplomacy or war. "Sir, they're requesting permission to board," the communications officer announced. "They want to conduct face-to-face negotiations." Veltar realized his mission had just become far more complicated than anyone at the Galactic Council had anticipated. These humans weren't desperate refugees begging for rescue. They were a powerful civilization with advanced technology and a clearly organized military force. The docking bay of the Harmony's edge hummed with nervous energy as the human shuttle attached to the alien vessel. Captain Veltar had never experienced first contact with such a militarily advanced species, and his crew watched anxiously as the airlock cycled open. Admiral Minho stepped through first, his uniform crisp and his bearing confident. Behind him came Lieutenant So Young, carrying a portable translation device and several data tablets. The humans moved with the disciplined precision of experienced military officers, their eyes quickly scanning the alien ship's layout and defensive positions. "Welcome aboard," Captain Veltar said through the universal translator, his forearms spread in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. "I am Captain Veltar of the Galactic Council survey vessel, Harmony's Edge." Minho nodded respectfully but remained alert. "I'm Admiral Minho of the Earth Defense Force. This is Lieutenant Soyoung, my aide and communications specialist. We appreciate your peaceful approach to our system." The two groups gathered in the ship's main conference room, where holographic displays showed star charts and communication logs. Veltar activated the recording of the distress signal his people had intercepted, playing back the mathematical sequences and what appeared to be humanity's desperate plea for help. "We received this transmission from your planet several months ago," Veltar explained, his purple eyes studying the humans' reactions. "The Galactic Council sent us to investigate and offer whatever assistance we could provide to your struggling civilization." Minho's eyebrows furrowed as he listened to the recording. He turned to So Young, who was rapidly analyzing the signal on her tablet. Something wasn't adding up. Earth's military command had strict protocols for all off-world communications, and no distress signal had been authorized. "We sent no distress signal," Minho stated firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed. "Lieutenant So Young, run a full analysis of this transmission. I want to know exactly where it came from." So Young's fingers flew across her device, cross-referencing the signal with Earth's historical communication records. Her expression grew increasingly puzzled as she worked. "Sir, this signal appears to be coming from deep space, not from Earth. Directly, the transmission pattern matches something much older." Captain Veltar watched with growing concern as the humans investigated the source of what his people had clearly identified as a distress call. If these humans hadn't sent the signal, then who had? And why did it contain such detailed information about Earth's location and struggles? After 20 minutes of intense analysis, Young looked up with a mixture of surprise and understanding. "Admiral, I've identified the source. This isn't a distress signal at all. It's from the Voyager 7 probe, launched 43 years ago." Minho leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Explain." "Voyager 7 was part of our deep space exploration program," Young continued, pulling up historical records on her tablet. "It carried a time capsule containing information about human history, including our past struggles with climate change, resource conflicts, and technological challenges. The probe was designed to broadcast this information if it ever encountered signs of intelligent life." The room fell silent as both species processed this revelation. What the Galactic Council had interpreted as a desperate cry for help was actually humanity's attempt to preserve their history and share their experiences with any alien civilizations they might encounter. Captain Veltar felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment wash over him. "So your species wasn't facing extinction when this message was sent?" "Not at all," Minho replied, a slight smile crossing his face. "Those were historical references to challenges we've already overcome. It's been a spacefaring civilization for decades. The moment the Zephyrians started sharing knowledge with humans, everything changed. What began as friendly cultural exchange quickly turned into something far more disturbing for the alien visitors. They couldn't believe what they were learning. About Earth, the first shock came when discussing basic living conditions. The Zephyrians discovered that Earth's gravity was 3 times stronger than what most intelligent species in the galaxy could even survive, while humans casually walked around, lifted objects, and went about their daily lives. The aliens realized that this same environment would crush the bones of nearly every other known civilization, but gravity was just the beginning. When humans described their atmosphere, the Zephyrians were stunned to learn that the very air people breathed would act as poison to most galactic races. The oxygen levels that humans needed to survive would literally burn the lungs of countless species. Across the stars, what humans considered fresh, life-giving air would be toxic death to their visitors. The weather patterns on Earth left the aliens absolutely terrified. Humans casually mentioned hurricanes that could level entire cities, tornadoes that destroyed everything in their path, and storms so powerful they could sink massive ships. The Zephyrians listened in horror as humans described blizzards that buried entire regions, heat waves that could kill, and lightning strikes that split the sky. To them, Earth sounded like a nightmare planet, where the very environment was constantly trying to kill its inhabitants. Perhaps most shocking of all was learning about human history. As the cultural exchange continued, Zephyrians discovered that humans had spent thousands of years in almost constant warfare with each other. They learned about massive battles, devastating conflicts, and weapons designed specifically to destroy other humans. The concept of war between members of the same species was nearly impossible for the peaceful Zephyrians to understand. Captain Veltar felt his blood run cold as he processed all this information. Everything they had learned pointed to one terrifying conclusion that he had hoped never to encounter. In all the galaxy's recorded history, there had only been theories about such species. The Galactic Council had discussed them in hushed whispers, wondering if they could even exist. Humans were what the galaxy feared most. A Deathworlder species. Deathworlders were the stuff of galactic nightmares. These were beings that evolved on planets so dangerous, so hostile, that they became incredibly resilient and potentially deadly. They could survive in conditions that would instantly kill other species. They were stronger, more durable, and more aggressive than anything else. In known space, with trembling hands, Captain Veltar composed an emergency message to the Galactic Council. This wasn't just a routine first contact report. This was a galaxy-wide warning about the most dangerous discovery in recorded history. He marked it as highest priority and sent it through the fastest communication channels available. The message was simple, but chilling. We have found them. The Deathworlders are real. Humanity represents the greatest potential threat the galaxy has ever encountered. Immediate council session required. The peaceful first contact mission had become something entirely different. The Zephyrians now realized they weren't just meeting another species, they had awakened. Something that could change the balance of power across the entire galaxy forever. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in their 1,000-year history. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a chaotic symphony of fear, excitement, and disagreement. The discovery of humanity had shattered their peaceful existence and forced them to confront their worst nightmares. The ethereal collective, known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and peaceful nature, spoke first. Their translucent leader floated gracefully to the center of the chamber, emanating calm energy that usually soothed even the most aggressive species. They argued that humanity should be welcomed immediately into the galactic community. Beings believed that offering friendship, protection, and guidance would help humans develop peacefully alongside other civilizations. The ethereals painted a hopeful picture of what could happen if they embraced humanity. They spoke of sharing advanced medical technology that could cure human diseases, offering energy sources that would end their dependence on fossil fuels, and teaching them peaceful ways to resolve conflicts. To them, humans were simply another species that needed gentle guidance to reach their full potential. But not everyone shared this optimistic view. The Chronari Empire, a militaristic civilization that had conquered dozens of star systems, saw humanity as an existential threat. Their war-scarred commander slammed his massive fist on the speaking podium, causing several smaller species to jump in terror. He declared that any species capable of thriving on a death world while constantly fighting amongst themselves was too dangerous to be allowed into galactic society. The Chronari presented evidence of human military capabilities, showing footage of their weapons, their strategies, and their willingness to fight, even when vastly outnumbered. They argued that humans would eventually turn their violent nature outward, conquering and destroying peaceful civilizations across the galaxy. Their solution was simple but brutal: complete isolation of Earth, possibly even military intervention. If necessary, between these two extremes, dozens of other species voiced their concerns and opinions. Some worried about economic disruption if humans entered galactic trade. Others feared that human unpredictability would destabilize carefully maintained peace treaties. A few species even suggested that humans might be useful as mercenaries or shock troops in future conflicts. Dr. Kethfer, the Council's leading expert on species development, presented the most disturbing analysis. He had spent decades studying how different civilizations evolved and progressed. According to his research, humanity displayed a combination of traits that had never been seen before in galactic history. Their capacity for both extreme violence and rapid technological advancement made them completely unpredictable. The doctor showed projections of human technological growth, demonstrating how they had progressed from simple tools to space travel in just a few thousand years. Most species took hundreds of thousands of years to achieve similar advancement, combined with their proven ability to adapt and survive in impossible conditions. Humans represented something the galaxy had never encountered before. As the debate raged on, the Council split into distinct factions. The Protection Alliance wanted to bring humans into the galactic community immediately. The Containment Coalition demanded Earth be isolated and monitored. The Exploitation Front saw opportunities to use human abilities for their own purposes. What none of them realized was that their supposedly secure communications were being intercepted. Human intelligence agencies had been quietly monitoring galactic transmissions ever since first contact. Deep in underground facilities on Earth, teams of analysts were translating alien languages, decoding their strategies, and preparing humanity for whatever decision the Council might make. The galaxy was debating humanity's fate, but humans were already 3 steps ahead. The Chronari Empire had made a fatal mistake. While the Galactic Council continued their endless debates about what to do with humanity, the militant Chronari decided to take matters into their own hands. They believed that a simple test would prove their point about human dangerousness while simultaneously weakening this potential threat. Their plan seemed straightforward and clever. Using unmarked vessels that couldn't be traced back to their empire, they would stage fake pirate attacks on human shipping lanes. The Chronari expected humans to respond like most civilized species, with defensive measures, diplomatic protests, and requests for galactic assistance. This would give them valuable intelligence about humans' military capabilities while making humans appear weak and dependent. The Chronari commanders were confident in their strategy. After all, they had conquered dozens of species using similar tactics. They launched their unmarked ships toward Earth's outer territories, targeting cargo vessels and mining operations. The attacks were meant to look like random piracy, nothing more than space bandits looking for easy targets, but the human response was nothing like what the Chronari expected. Instead of defensive positioning or calls for help, something far more terrifying happened. The human fleet mobilized with a speed and coordination that shocked even seasoned military observers throughout the galaxy. Admiral Jehoon, commanding the human defense forces, immediately recognized that these weren't random pirate attacks. The timing, the targets, and the tactics all pointed to something much more organized. His tactical officer, Commander Hajen, quickly analyzed the attack patterns and confirmed their suspicions. This was a coordinated assault by a military force, trying to appear as pirates. The human response was swift and absolutely ruthless. Rather than simply defending their shipping lanes, they launched an aggressive counterattack that caught the Chronari completely off guard. Human ships moved with precision through space, using advanced tracking technology to hunt down every single attacking vessel. What followed was a masterclass in military efficiency that terrified observers across the galaxy. Human forces didn't just fight back. They hunted their attackers like predators tracking prey, using a combination of advanced sensors, rapid strike capabilities, and tactical brilliance. They systematically destroyed every single pirate vessel within just a few days. The Chronari had expected a defensive response, but instead found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Human ships appeared seemingly out of nowhere, struck with devastating precision, and disappeared before return fire could be effective. The unmarked Chronari vessels were picked off one by one, their crews unable to even send distress signals. But the humans weren't finished. Using advanced forensic analysis of the destroyed ships, human intelligence forces began tracing the attacks back to their source. They analyzed metal compositions, weapon signatures, and communication frequencies. Within hours, it identified the true origin of the attacks. The Chronari Empire suddenly found themselves facing their worst nightmare. A massive human fleet appeared at their border, moving in perfect formation with weapons charged and ready. The humans had not only defeated their test attack, but had traced it directly back to Chronari Space. Admiral Jehoon's message was simple and terrifying in its directness. The humans demanded an immediate explanation for the unprovoked attacks on their shipping. There were no diplomatic niceties, no requests for galactic mediation, just a cold demand for answers backed by overwhelming military force. The Chronari, who had intended to test human capabilities, now realized they had awakened something far beyond their understanding. They had expected to face a typical civilized species, but instead found themselves confronting true Deathworlders, who had turned their own test into a demonstration of human military supremacy. The confrontation at the Chronari border had escalated beyond anyone's worst fears. Faced with undeniable evidence of their covert attack and a human fleet demanding answers, the Chronari Empire made a decision that would change galactic history forever. Rather than admit their mistake or offer diplomatic solutions, they chose the path that had served them for centuries: overwhelming military force, the Chronari leadership. Their pride wounded and their military reputation at stake, refused to back down to what they still considered a primitive species. Emergency war. Councils convened across Chronari space as massive imperial fleets began mobilizing. Battle-hardened commanders who had conquered entire star systems prepared for what they believed would be a quick demonstration of galactic military superiority. Within hours, the largest military fleet in Chronar history was moving toward human space. Hundreds of warships, each one a technological marvel that had terrorized peaceful species for generations. formed battle formations that stretched across multiple star systems. The Chronari were preparing to teach humanity a lesson that would echo throughout the galaxy. The mobilization sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Species that had remained neutral during the debates about humanity suddenly found themselves forced to choose sides in what appeared to be an inevitable war. Ancient alliances were tested as civilizations realized they could no longer remain passive observers. Some species, terrified of both human unpredictability and Chronari military might, chose to support the empire they knew rather than the unknown threat from Earth. Others, remembering their own experiences with Chronari aggression, quietly began offering support to humanity. The galaxy was splitting into armed camps for the first time in centuries. The Ethereal Collective, desperate to prevent galactic war, launched frantic mediation efforts. Their peaceful envoys traveled between human and Chronari space, attempting to arrange negotiations before the situation spiraled completely out of control. They offered to host peace talks, provide neutral meeting grounds, and even serve as guarantors for any agreements reached. Captain Alta and his Zephyrian crew found themselves in an impossible position. They had initiated first contact with humanity in good faith, expecting a routine diplomatic mission. Now they watched in horror as their peaceful gesture threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Veltar sent desperate messages to both sides, explaining that the original contact had been meant as friendship, not a threat assessment. But the Zephyrians' explanations fell on deaf ears, because humanity had discovered something that changed everything. Human intelligence services had finally cracked the galactic communication networks completely, gaining access to the full record of council debates about their species. What they learned shattered any remaining trust in galactic civilization. Humans. Read transcripts of council members calling them monsters, debating whether to isolate Earth, and discussing ways to contain or exploit their species. They discovered that what they had interpreted as friendly first contact was actually reconnaissance for a potential threat. The betrayal cut deep into human consciousness, transforming their view of the galaxy forever. Admiral Minho, reading the intelligence reports in his command center, felt a cold fury settle over him. Humanity had responded to first contact with curiosity and hope, only to discover they were being evaluated like dangerous animals. The galaxy saw them as monsters, to be contained rather than potential friends, to be welcomed. The decision was made in Earth's highest military councils. If the galaxy wanted to see humanity as dangerous, then they would discover exactly how dangerous Deathworlders could be. Admiral Minho authorized the deployment of humanity's full military capability, unleashing weapons and strategies that had been developed during centuries of warfare on the ultimate Deathworld. The galaxy was about to learn why. Earth had produced the most dangerous species in known space, the aftermath of humanity's devastating military demonstration forced the Galactic Council to face an uncomfortable truth. Everything they thought they knew about power dynamics in the galaxy had been completely wrong. The species they had debated containing or controlling had just proven themselves to be the most formidable military force in known space. Council chambers that had once buzzed with confident debates about humanity's fate now fell silent whenever human representatives entered. The same alien leaders who had argued about isolating Earth now spoke in hushed, respectful tones when discussing humanity's role in galactic affairs. The balance of power had shifted permanently, and everyone knew it. The restructuring of galactic politics happened surprisingly quickly. Species that had survived for millennia through careful diplomacy and political maneuvering suddenly found themselves adapting to a new reality where humanity held unprecedented influence. The old system of consensus building and lengthy negotiations gave way to a more direct approach that reflected human participation, rather than continuing the failed strategy of treating humans as either helpless, victims needing protection, or dangerous threats requiring containment. The Council made a revolutionary decision. They acknowledged humanity as equals in galactic society, but equals with a very specific and powerful role to play. The new treaty that emerged from these negotiations was unlike anything in galactic history. Humanity was officially designated as a protector species, a classification that had never existed before but now seemed essential for galactic stability. This wasn't just a symbolic title, it came with real responsibilities and unprecedented authority. Earth itself was transformed from an isolated backwater world into something far more significant. The planet became recognized as a fortress world, a military stronghold that other species could call upon during times of crisis. This designation meant that Earth would serve as both a shield and a sword for galactic civilization, protecting peaceful species from threats they couldn't handle alone. The practical implications were staggering. Human military technology, tactics, and personnel would now be available to defend civilizations across the galaxy. Species that had spent centuries living in fear of aggressive neighbors suddenly had access to protection from the most effective military force ever discovered. Admiral Minho found himself in a position he had never imagined when he first received reports of alien contact, standing before the full Galactic Council Assembly as humanity's first official representative. He embodied the dramatic transformation that had occurred. The same military leader who had demonstrated human combat capabilities now served as a bridge between his species and the rest of galactic civilization. Lieutenant Saw Young stood at his side, representing the new generation of humans who would grow up in a galaxy where their species was respected rather than feared. Her presence symbolized the future of human-alien relations, built on mutual respect rather than the misunderstandings that had nearly led to galactic war. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone present in the council chambers. The aliens' original response to what they interpreted as humanity's accidental distress signal had set in motion a chain of events that completely transformed galactic politics. Their attempt to make peaceful contact had accidentally awakened the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. But perhaps even more importantly, their actions had also gained them the most reliable and stalwart defenders they could have possibly hoped for. Humanity's warrior nature, which had initially terrified alien civilizations, had become their greatest source of security and protection. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most dangerous allies make the most dependable friends.